I don't know. Bellefonte, you got a song? Or Ronnie, you got a song? Don, Linda. 535. 535. 535. Gloryland Way. We started without you, Tom. I'm saying. 535. Gloryland Way. I'm in the way, the bright and shining way. I'm in the glory land way, telling the world that Jesus saves today. Yes, I'm in the glory land way. I'm in the glory land way. I'm in the glory land way. Heaven is nearer and the way groweth clearer, for I'm in the glory land way. List to the call, the gospel call today. Get in the glory land way. Wonders come home, oh, hasten to obey, for I'm in the glory land way. I'm in the glory land way. I'm in the glory land way. Heaven is nearer and the way groweth clearer, for I'm in the glory land way. Onward I go, rejoicing in his love. I'm in the glory land way. Soon I shall see him in that home above. Oh, I'm in the glory land way. I'm in the glory land way. Oh, I'm in the glory land way. Heaven is nearer and the way groweth clearer, for I'm in the glory land way. Brother Belfont, would you pick out a invitation song and lead that after the lesson? No? I don't have one picked out. We'll pick one out and I'll lead it. Tommy, do you have one you'd like to sing? Okay. 533? We're close by there, aren't we? Nearer, still nearer. 533. Nearer, still nearer, close to thy heart. Draw me, my Savior, so precious thou art. Fold me, oh, fold me close to thy breast. Shelter me safe in that haven of rest. Shelter me safe in that haven of rest. Nearer, still nearer, nothing I bring, not as an offering to Jesus my King. Only my sinful, now contrite heart, grant me the cleansing thy blood doth impart. Grant me the cleansing thy blood doth impart. Nearer, still nearer, while life shall last, till safe in glory my anchor is cast. through endless ages, ever to be nearer, my Savior, still nearer to thee. Nearer, my Savior, still nearer to thee. Let's sing number 650. We're learning that, and didn't we sing this at the sing the other night? Listen to our hearts. I think we did. 650. And for our song of invitation will be number 651. 651, if you want to mark that. That's just one page over. 651, Where No One Stands Alone. That'll be our song of invitation tonight. How do you explain? How do you describe a love that runs from east to west and runs as deep as it is wide? You know all our hopes, Lord, you know all our fears, and words cannot express the love we feel, but long for you to hear. So listen to our hearts, hear our spirit sing, a song of peace that flows from those you have redeemed. We will use the words we know to tell you what an awesome God you are. But words are not enough to tell you of our love. So listen to our hearts. If words could fall like rain from these lips of mine, and if I had 1,000 years, Lord, I would still run out of time. If you listen to my heart, every word will say, thank you for the life, thank you for the truth, thank you for the way. So listen to our hearts, hear our spirit sing, a song of praise that flows from those you have redeemed. We will use the words we know to tell you what an awesome God you are. But words are not enough to tell you of our love. So listen to our hearts.
Good evening, everyone. Good to see everybody. We got a couple of housekeeping notes before we get into Ecclesiastes chapter 2. So next Sunday, first off, there will be no All Gather next Sunday, so we know that's not happening. Streetsboro is wrapping up their VBS, but also next Sunday is the visitation for Delmar Cottrell, and that is from 1 to 3, and then we are having a meal here at 3:30. So the question has been raised, because that meal will probably go from 3:30 to 5:30 and still got to clean up. And so the question has been raised, should we, just go ahead and cancel services for next week since Streetsboro is not coming? Since most of the folks who are here will be helping with the meal. So I, at this time, will open the floor to any thoughts on the topic. Greg.
It's going to make a long day for a lot of ladies and men that are working.
Because the food doesn't just poof show up? Oh, huh. I just thought it poof showed up. All right. Yeah. So I am in agreement, and here is my rationale for that. You know, we don't have book, chapter, and verse on Sunday evening services. It is a good thing to do, but it is also an opportunity for us to take what we talk about in here and show it by going to the visitation and supporting Tyler and the family, and then also by, you know, the support of the meal afterwards. So, and as Greg pointed out, it's going to be a long day for our ladies, and Greg cooks, 50 pounds of ziti, or whatever he may come up with. So I agree. I think it may be a long day, so I think it may be better served to just plan to cancel evening service and encourage everyone to support Tyler and the family and the meal afterwards. So Greg and I are in agreement. Are there anybody else? We are by no means the only ones who have a say in the matter. Don? Go ahead and cancel. All right. I'm seeing more head nods and head shakes, so we'll go ahead and plan to cancel. I will send an email to Kathy to make sure we get it put in the bulletin, so we make sure to announce it that we won't have evening service, and so that we support Tyler and the family as they mourn Tyler's dad's passing. And that is a visitation, so it's a visitation service, is that what they called it? Or memorial visitation, that's what they called it. And so it's 1 to 3, so it's just visiting hours. That's all it is. So yeah, you don't have to stay for the whole 2 hours. So I've been at some funerals that lasted 2 hours, though. Sometimes that does happen. So all right. So anything else that need to bring up before we actually get into our class for the evening? Okay, Ecclesiastes chapter 2. So I bring greetings from the church in Coshocton. So it's always good to get down and visit with them. You are influencing them, and you may not have ever met them. Because went down there last year and started talking about the stuff we're doing up here was planting seeds. And so now they're using that language and talking about ways they can plant seeds. And they've got a project that they're working on for next year that I'm very excited about. And I'll be mentioning it in our next men's meeting, because I was like, that's a good idea. I want to steal that. So just want to share that with you. Also, one more thing before we get in. There was a recent study that was done about churches and kind of the age of churches, quote unquote, and it looked at various denominations. And so it looked at Baptist, Methodist, yada, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And does anybody want to take a guess, on average, what percentage of members of the churches of Christ are under 65? Does anybody want to take a guess what percentage that is? 30. Okay. All right. Any other guesses? Anybody want to go lower than 30? 20. Interesting. All right. About 20? 47% are under 65. So they're 59 and under. And so that means that in reality, half of our congregations are under. But what's more than that, and I'll have to find the thing, but we also have the largest demographic under 40 of any group. So compared to any other group, so Baptist, Methodist, whoever, we have more people under 40 who attend our churches, our congregations, right? And we don't see that all the time, right? And so we think that, so that just tells us a couple of things. One, it tells us that maybe things aren't as bleak as sometimes we feel that they are. But two, it also tells us that demographic does want to go to church. They do want to have a good, strong faith. And so then we shouldn't necessarily be afraid of reaching out to that under 40 demographic. So I thought that was encouraging. I saw that this week and thought I would pass that along. So, and because it didn't come from members of the church, it came from, just one of these generic studies groups. So they had no, motivation to pump up our numbers, right? And so, but they compared them all, and they look. If I can find it, I'll throw it up next Sunday before the sermon. But anyway, Ecclesiastes chapter 2. So we're talking about the vanity last time of self-indulgence, that Solomon was seeking fulfillment in his life, and he tried laughter. He tried anything that his body desired, drunkenness, all those things, alcohol, whatever. He sought to make great buildings and accomplishments, great entertainment, but none of it actually mattered. And so we pick up in chapter 2, verse 12 this evening with him looking towards wisdom. He says, "So I considered wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man who comes after the king? Only what has already been done. Then I saw that there is more gain in wisdom than in folly, and there is more gain in light than in darkness. The wise person has his eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. Yet I perceive that the same event happens to all of them. Then I said in my heart, what will happen to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For of the wise as of the fool there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come all will have been forgotten. How the wise dies just like the fool. So I hated life, because what is done under the sun was grievous to me, for all is vanity and striving after the wind." All right. So he considered the idea of wisdom versus folly, or we might say stupidity, or dumb choices, right? Because wisdom is a practical knowledge of making the good decisions based on experience, or in his case, based on wisdom that comes from God. Folly, then, is the opposite of that. It is poor choices, bad decision making. And he reflects on the idea that I saw that there was more gain in wisdom than in folly, and that there is more gain in light than in darkness. So he goes and he's like, when I'm adding it up, and wisdom is better than stupid, right? You know, smart choices are better than being dumb, right? Light is better than darkness. And that should be the end of the matter. However, it is not, right? Because he takes it a step further, and I think he just like overthinks it, because he says, but at the end of the day, the same thing happens to both of them, right? Because guess what? You can be the wisest man in the world, and guess what? You're still going to die. You could be the dumbest man in the world, and guess what? You're still going to die. Now, I would argue that might expedite the process, right? Because, you know, if you're not a wise individual, you will make poor choices, but the end result is the same. The sum total is the same. We all will pass away. And then he asked the question, why then have I been so very wise? If I'm just going to die, why did I do this? Now, he's going to talk more later about why to do that, why to seek wisdom, but he's asking the question, if the end result is the same, why bother? And then he gets into verse 17 where he says, I hated life because it's all pointless. It's all vanity. Again, when that word vanity is used, it's the idea of a breath, a vapor. It is momentary, right? And so life is fleeting, might be another way to phrase it, right? And so he was bummed at that thought, because there's nothing worse than working hard only to find you've made no progress, right? Or working hard and making progress and then having nothing done about it. I can look back and think about projects that I worked on at work, right? And I invested myself in, right? I spent time and effort on those projects only to have my manager go, nah. But why? And there was no good reason. Like sometimes there's a good reason, but when you invest yourself and you put yourself into something, and then to just feel like it's been discounted, nobody likes that feeling, right? And Solomon here then basically was asking, what's the point of my life? I hated my life. And so that's a moment of distress, right? And it's also interesting because does anybody want to take the position that Solomon did not have the favor of God, that God wasn't looking out for Solomon? Because I think he did, right? Now, Solomon wasn't always faithful, and now that's a different issue when he's not faithful. But by and large, Solomon's got it pretty cushy, right? God bequeathed him all the wisdom in the world. God set him on the throne. God kept him in power. God gave him all of these things, and he's sitting there going, my life is horrible, right? And so we look at that and we go, really, Solomon? Come on now. But that's how he felt, which I think should communicate to us that we can feel that way as well. We can feel like, what's the point? And there's nothing wrong with that feeling. The question is always, what do you do with that feeling, right? And that's always the where the rubber meets the road, right? It's not that you're not going to be tempted. It's what do you do with that temptation, right? It is always, where does the rubber meet the road? Any thoughts or questions on verses 12 to 17? Go ahead, Greg. Mm-hmm. No. Mm-hmm. No. Well, and that's the overarching theme of Ecclesiastes. It's not about wealth. It's not about accomplishments. It's not about, because he goes through a period where he's like, if I just put my name on enough buildings, my life will matter, right? And that's, and that's a struggle we all have, I think, right? We struggle with the point. What is our legacy? That is kind of the question that's being asked here, right? At the end of the day, what's it all about? And that's a very good question to ask. And that's the question that Solomon is going to ask. And it's the question that he ultimately answers at the end of the book, which is to fear God and keep his commandments. That's the point, right? Other thoughts? Yes, ma'am? Mm-hmm. Okay. Sure. I think that like any situation that puts you in a position where you're questioning why, or what, you're in that pit, that valley of the shadow of death moment, as the psalmist would write about, right? And so loss of a spouse, loss of a child, right? One could even say the law, like, and they're not necessarily equal, but loss of a family member, any family member, right? Especially if you're close to that family member. But even, I know there was one lady in Grove City who, she just asked one time, it's like, why do I always seem to have it so rough? Right? Because she had it rough. She, had issues at home with her husband, Bob, and she had issues with, being on a fixed income and with her kids, and like was trying to live a Christian life and be the best. And she was a good Christian woman, but man, it felt like she's like, man, I could catch a break. Or what was it Rodney Dangerfield used to say? If I didn't have bad luck, I'd have no luck at all, right? And that's what it felt like for her, right? And so it is natural, I think, to have verse 17 is a feeling. I hated my life because it all seemed pointless. What's the point? But again, it's not the feeling that's the problem. It's what you do with the feeling, right? How do I respond to that feeling in my life? But yeah, that it definitely could see that applying to if you lose a spouse, for sure, because especially your spouse is your best friend, they're your other half, and it can feel like your world is gone, right? Very good point. All right, let's keep going. Verse 18. I hated all of my toil in which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool? Yet he will master all which I toiled and used my wisdom under the sun. This also is vanity. So I turned about and gave my heart up to despair over the toils of my labor under the sun. Because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. This also is a vanity and greater evil. What has a man from all the toil and striving of the heart with which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is vexation. Even in the night his heart does not rest. This is also vanity. So yeah, like things are not looking good for Solomon right here. Now I do wonder what toil he's actually doing under the sun as king. I don't think it's a lot, but the principle is true though, right? Is you stop and think about it. Why am I working so hard, right? Like I'm leaving it for the person after me, right? That now for a lot of us, it's like, well, I'm leaving it for my kids. Okay, but how many stories of kids have we heard who were, we want a better life for our kids, and the better life that we give them ends up wrecking their life, right? Because we spoil them, or suddenly I have a guilty pleasure of listening to clips from the Dave Ramsey show of people who call in, right? And it happens that people call in and go, we received $3 million when such and such when such and such a parent passed away, right? And now we're $1 million in debt. How did you spend $4 million? Just poof, right? And so they were given this, the toil of their parents was passed on to them, and they reaped the benefit of it, and then they squandered it. And there's a movement that's gaining popularity called Retire with Zero, or Die with Zero. That's what it's called, Die with Zero. So that it's like, look, feel free to work hard in your life, but when you pass away, make sure you have zero in that account. And it's a philosophy, and you don't have to agree with it. I'm not saying it's the right one or the wrong one, but the idea is that you can't take it with you, right? And you can leave it behind, but is that necessarily the best call, right? Would it be better served if you want to leave something for your kids, go ahead and give it to them, right? That might be something that, if they've got a mortgage and you say, look, we're going to put this money towards paying off your mortgage. And it may not be all of the mortgage, but like there's a cool thing for that, right? And again, there's no right or wrong with some of this stuff, but you do have to acknowledge the fact that everything you work for is going to be picked up by the next generation, and there's no guarantee they'll be good stewards of it, right? But at the end of the day, everything we work for is going to be enjoyed by someone else. My friends Dean and Kara moved into a house. They are the second owners of the house. And the guy who built the house, was a perfectionist and was very much overbuilt everything, right? So like instead of 2x4 construction, it is 2x6 construction, right? It's got so much insulation in it that like you barely feel anything temperature-wise. And so they are reaping the benefits of the house this guy built. And so that's gonna happen, that things we build will be enjoyed by someone else. And it can be disheartening to think that all of our work at the end of the day, it's not really, it passes away. And so that's what he's struggling with. That's what he is saying, what he is fighting, that feeling there in verse 22 and 23 of, what has a man from all the toil and striving of the heart with which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is vexation. Even in night his heart does not rest. This is also vanity. And so he's thinking about the person who is so consumed by their work, right? So consumed with building up their life for tomorrow, or building up their life. And at the end of the day, that's vanity. Now, elsewhere in Scripture, it teaches us that it's okay to have wealth. It's okay to be prosperous, right? But again, no one can serve two masters, right? You can either serve God or money. And in this scenario, this is the person who is chasing that thing. Because we're going to see what verse 24 is, which is what should actually be pursued by the person, right? So any questions 18 to 23? Yeah, that's a great question. Okay. So why does he have so many wives and concubines and such? Well, and are they the problem? The answer is I don't know any scriptural evidence that they are the problem. The answer is just because someone has wisdom does not mean one has to use it, right? Okay, the reality is that polygamy was allowed in the Old Testament. And truthfully, it was occurring even in the New Testament, right? So polygamy was a thing. And was it a smart thing? Not always, because we see situations where you had wives not getting along, right? Where they fought with one another. That did happen, and they were vying for that. But the reality is that most people did not necessarily have a plurality of wives, right? It's not that every house had two wives on the street. Like, that wasn't how it worked. Because one of the caveats for having multiple wives was that you had to be able to provide for them, right? So you couldn't treat a wife as a second-class citizen. Whatever you provided for the first wife, you needed to provide for the second wife. Now, that doesn't mean that she you didn't have favorites, right? And so for the ones who were wife did not always involve conjugal visits, but they could have, right? They did, well, they at least once did, otherwise it wasn't considered a genuine marriage, right? But what does it mean to be a wife, right? Well, it meant that someone was going to provide for you, and it meant that you were taken care of, you had status, and that you had safety, right? And so, now there's also a level of politicalness to it, right? So that Solomon, some of these wives are political alliances, right? And the reality is that, and I go back to I go back to Kennedy a lot because we talk about that as the Camelot years. And the reality is that Kennedy was sleeping around on Jackie. Like, it is a common knowledge thing. They had an express route in and out of the White House, right? And we like to think, no, the morals were better back then. They weren't, okay? But what was different back then was just because he slept with someone did not mean he had an obligation to that person, right? In Solomon's day, that was the case. He did have a responsibility, obligation to that woman. And so there's a component to which if he found somebody attractive and he wanted her like David, his dad, did, then he had an obligation that if he wants a relationship, that is a life commitment. So there's that component of it as well, of the culture dictated it. So it wasn't a sin. It was allowed by culture. He had the means to support all of these women. And then the concubine was like a wife, but not the status. So she was taken care of and had all of those things, but she, did not have the wife status. So she was considered second class. And there was a lot of reasons why. So it was okay for him to do. But also, once he got married, he wasn't necessarily going to divorce her. And so there's just a lot to it. Does that make it a smart move? No, it does not. But also, I don't think it necessarily caused problems per se, because that wasn't like, we don't have record that that was the issues, like, if that makes sense. So it wasn't a smart move, but it also wasn't unethical according to that day and age, right? Different times. That's all I can say. It's different times. So.
Said that other places in Scripture it says it's okay to accumulate wealth.
Yeah.
Where are those places? Because I just think,
Excellent question.
I can think of all kinds of scriptures that say, take everything you have and give it to the poor, take that or that, you know.
Sure.
I mean, there's multiple places where if everybody in the early church had said in Acts that they gave up everything they had and nobody had a month because nobody claimed anything as their own. And it seems to me that the overwhelming majority of things say that shouldn't be a goal of ours.
So I did not say goal. I said that it was okay to be wealthy. There is a difference. So, okay, a couple of things here. There are two things that come to mind right off the bat, right? So 1 Timothy chapter 6. And we'll go back to verse 6. Godliness with contentment is great gain. We brought nothing in the world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. Which, right? So the reality is if we came with a zero bank account, and if we leave with a zero bank account, that is fine, right? If we have food and clothing, these we will be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction, right? So verse 9, the key word there is those who desire to be rich, right? Then the very next verse, for the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs, right? So we have that warning that it is the love of money that is the root of all kinds of evil. He's not saying that money is the root of all kinds of evil, but it is the love of money that is the root of all kinds of evil, right? And so it is an understanding of where is your focus? Where is your heart in the matter, right? So, and let me turn us over to one of my favorite illustrations of this, which is in the book of Acts. Chapter 16. Okay? Now, we have to learn, we have to examine this based on what the text says, right? All right. Acts 16, verse 13. All right. On the Sabbath day, we went out. This is Acts 16:13. On the Sabbath day, we went outside the gate to the riverside, where we supposed there was a place of prayer. We sat down and spoke to the women who had come there. One who heard us was a woman named Lydia from the city of Thyatira, a seller of purple goods, who was a worshiper of God. The Lord opened her heart to pay attention to what was said by Paul. After she was baptized, and her household as well, she urged us, saying, if you have judged me faithful to the Lord, come to my house and stay. And she prevailed upon us. So, Lydia. Here's what we know about Lydia. She is from Thyatira, and she is a seller of purple goods. Well, what do we know about purple goods? Well, purple goods was a sign of wealth and status, right? So she sold fabric and textiles that would have been in higher end clientele, right? Not only do we know that about her, but we know that she's from Thyatira, right? So she's from that city. That's her home operation, where her base is. But but this is happening in Philippi, right? So she has a base of operations in Philippi and base operations in Thyatira and operations in Philippi. So she's got two places that she's operating out of. Multiple locations, one might say. So that's a context clue that she's successful, right? So the industry she's in, the fact that she's operating out of two cities, and then she goes on to say, hey, if you think that I'm a good Christian, that I'm faithful, you're going to come to my house and stay. And they do. And she takes care of them, takes care of their needs. So she had a house in which she could take care of Paul and his companions. So it was not going to be an imposition to her to take on these individuals and care for them and give them food and a place to stay, right? So by those definitions, she was probably a wealthy woman. All context clues point to it, right? We also have other scriptures that tell us that there were individuals who, as an individual, funded mission work, right? Individuals who partnered with the gospel, right? And so we do have that instance in Acts chapter 2 that they sold money and gave to any as had need, but we also see that wasn't everybody, right? Because if everybody just upon becoming a Christian emptied your bank account to the church, we would have no need for there to be warnings to the wealthy, right? Because James writes to wealthy Christians, right? Paul is writing to Timothy to warn him about the dangers of wealth, right? So we have all of these things that have been written to individuals about the danger of being wealthy. But it is clear from the various stories in the New Testament of the church that there were individuals who were wealthy, right? Zacchaeus, if we assume that Zacchaeus continued in the faith, right, he would have still been a wealthy man. Now, he returned to anybody if he had defrauded them, but a tax collector in the first century was a wealthy guy. And so it goes back to that idea of desire and pursuit of wealth. Because it goes back to what Jesus says. No man can serve two masters. He can either serve God or money, right? And so, I don't know, does that answer the question a little bit? Sure. Well,
I think it's kind of like the difference between drinking and drunkenness. You know what I mean?
exactly.
We avoid drinking so that we don't become a drunkard. You know what I'm saying? And then but that does that mean drinking's okay?
That's a debated topic, right? And some of it's cultural, right? Because fun fact, in other countries, that's not a topic, right? Because if you go to Europe, the Christians over there are not having that discussion over whether or not a Christian can drink. Even within churches of Christ, they don't have that discussion because they do. But the difference is their culture is not one of drinking to excess, right? And so if you can't drink, and so for them, that's not their culture. And so America is one of the only countries to where that it is a debate whether or not a Christian can have a drink of alcohol. Interestingly enough, it doesn't really happen. And when it does happen in other countries, if you take the discussion back, it's because there was an American missionary that went over and taught them that. And like it genuinely is. And so now that is me skirting around the topic of whether it's right or wrong, right? But it's the love of money. If you are someone who can't have money without making it consume you, then you got a problem. I think about that one guy, Jordan Belfort, I think of his name is. He was called The Wolf of Wall Street. There was a Time magazine article on him. I think they've made a couple movies since then. But basically, he was so consumed by money that he started doing what they call penny stocks, and basically selling people like scam companies in order to make millions and millions of dollars. He was consumed by the desire for money. He loved money more than anything, right? And the reality is, and we'll talk about it in chapter 3 of Ecclesiastes, but there's a season for everything under the sun. Well, if there's a season for everything under the sun, it includes making money, right? And so the other thing you have to ask yourself is, what defines rich? What does it mean to be rich? Like monetarily speaking. What's the number?
Relative, I guess, depends where you're at.
Exactly. Congratulations. If you live in America, you are automatically rich because you are wealthier than 99% of the rest of the world. Congratulations. You didn't know that. So, but also, does anybody know what is the favorite car manufacturer for millionaires? Does anybody know? Anybody want to take a guess? Rolls Royce. All right, you're going to say Ford. It is Honda. Honda. Most millionaires in this country are driving a Honda. Because you may think a millionaire is rich. I do, because I ain't a millionaire, right? You know how they became a millionaire? They spent 30, 40 years working, and they put a little aside. They bought a house when they could, and now, you know, their net worth is $1 million. And so they're a millionaire on paper, you know. But at the same time, you know, what's it matter? The question is not, if you are somebody who struggles with wealth, then yes, or money, that is the question. The question is, what do you do with the gifts that God has given you? Because we find in, let me go over there. You have to forgive me. I got to use my cheater. It's been a long day. 1 Corinthians 12. Oh, I was there. Go me. It doesn't look right. Hold on. No, that's not that. That is a good passage. That's not the one. Hold on. All right, go to Romans 12. I don't know if that's what I was thinking of, but it's the one I'll look at. So Romans 12. Okay. Good chapter all the way around. Yeah, there we go. So, and then we'll go back to 2 Corinthians in a minute, right? This is talking about gifts, right? So Romans 12, having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let them use them. If prophecy in proportion to our faith, if service in our serving, the one who teaches in his teaching, the one who exhorts in his exhortation, the one who contributes in generosity, the one who leads with zeal, the one who does acts of mercy with cheerfulness. So basically, there are going to be some people who have a gift of contribution, according to Paul. That means there are going to be some people who their service to the church is check writing. Well, you can't be a check writer if your check bounces. You got to have money, right? Now, what's that mean? Well, you could be somebody who maybe you only have $100,000, but you're living on $40,000, and so you write a check for $1,000 because it's no sweat off your back, right? And so again, we are to give as we have prospered, right? That is what Scripture teaches. Well, we all prosper a little differently, right? And so again, we know that the early church had wealthy people. That's who Paul yells at in 1 Corinthians when he talks about the folks who are getting drunk. And so we know that there are wealthy people in the early church. And the thing that he gets onto them for is the fact that the people who let the wealth be their God, that is the problem. So, but again, what is wealthy? What is rich? It's subjective. It really, really is. So, but I will tell you this. The people who I know who have been blessed by God to be monetarily successful, but have kept God as their guiding light, are some of the most generous individuals I have ever met. Because they are, because they understand that they are stewards of that money. It is not their money. God blessed them with it, and they use it to bless others. And so that has been my experience with people who can be rich without being lovers of money. And Terry Evans is the guy who I cite, who is one of my heroes. Terry was a commercial real estate appraiser, and he was also an auctioneer, and he was very, very financially successful. How financially successful? Well, he didn't have insurance. You say, that doesn't make any sense. Well, he had a heart attack, and he's in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee, and they medevaced him to the hospital, to Vanderbilt, which is not a cheap hospital, right? And he gets a bill in the mail for it. And I say, Mr. Evans, it's going to be such and such amount of money. And he calls him up. He says, you say it's going to be such and such amount of money. They say, yep. All right, if I write you a check today, how much is it? Well, they obviously lowered the bill when you pay cash. And he wrote him a check, right? So you imagine a medevac flight for a heart attack and all the care, and he had enough money to write a check for it. But also, when the church needed a fellowship hall, he wrote a check for that. When they needed to send kids to camp, he wrote a check for that. When things needed to happen, he wrote checks for those. And so it's really just a question of what is your service, and if God has blessed you financially, then use that to his glory. Greg?
Joseph, what's a rich man if you read it in Matthew?
Good call.
And you go to Luke, or you go to John, you find out John. And after these things, Joseph of Arimathea, who was a disciple of Jesus, and secretly, for the fear of Jews, asked Pilate that he might take the body and gave him permission. Now, he also sit on the council, so he was a well-known individual, and he believed in Jesus and looked forward to the kingdom. And he came to the body with. And then Nicodemus also, who already had come to Jesus by night, came bringing a mixture of myrrh and olives, 75 pounds in weight.
Yeah.
He had to have some pesos too.
Yeah.
He had to be a rich man as well. And those people, what did they do with their money? They helped Jesus to be prepared, and they put him in a new tomb. Even though he's only going to use it for 3 days. I don't know if they all understood that until they actually resurrected.
Yeah. And so at the end of the day, my faith is in God, and I use money to accomplish things for my faith in God, right? You all did that today, right? You have faith in God. You used your money to get breakfast. You used your money to put on, to have clothes to put on. You used money to buy a car, put gas in the car so that you could come here and worship with the saints. And maybe that's now your bank account's towards zero, right? But there are others who have more and they give more. And that's just the way it is. And Joseph of Arimathea is a great example of that. It's interesting when you look at kind of the history of things and see that the idea that Christians can't have money is very much tied to puritanical teachings of the 17 and 1800s. So, because, right? It's very much, that was a popular thing of, it's wrong to show wealth. It's wrong to have any, visible things, to the point where it's like women can't wear jewelry. Men need to wear plain clothes, only certain colors, things like that. And that's still practiced among the Amish today, but two different belief systems that came at it from different angles. So, any other thoughts or comments? Sounds like maybe we need to do some more study on that, because there's a lot of verses about it.
Because I mean, if you go by what Jesus said,
Sure. It's a worthwhile study. So, like, because I will, and I will go ahead and tell you that the end result is gonna be, it's okay to make money. So it's when you make money your God, that is where the problem always comes into play. So, all right, any other thoughts, questions, comments? All right, well, we are out of time. But good discussion, and it's an important topic because it's a struggle. I know Eric has talked about that topic before as well. But as always, we want to extend the invitation. So if there's anyone here tonight who needs to respond to the invitation, we ask that you come at this time, as together we stand and together we sing.
In the night with my head bowed low, with the darkness as black as could be, and my heart felt alone, and I cried, "Oh Lord, don't hide your face from me. Hold my hand all the way, every hour, every day, from here to the great unknown. Take my hand, let me stand where no one stands alone. Like a king, I may live in a palace so tall, with great riches to call my own. But I don't know a thing in this whole wide world that's worse than being alone. Hold my hand all the way, every hour, every day, from here to the great unknown. Take my hand, let me stand where no one stands alone. Man, well, our closing song will be number 652. 652, the next page over. Thank you so much for the lesson today, Brother Matt, this evening, and Brother Belafonte today. It's been a good day to have worshiped here at Ravenna. And then after this song, we'll have our dismissal prayer. Unto thee, O Lord, do I lift up my soul. Unto thee, O Lord, do I lift up my soul. O my God, I'll trust in thee. Let me not be ashamed, let not my enemies triumph over me. Yea, let covenant wait on thee be ashamed. Yea, let none that wait on thee be ashamed. O my God, I'll trust in thee. Let me not be ashamed, let not my enemies triumph over me. Remember not the sins of my youth. Remember not the sins of my youth. Oh my God, I trust in thee. Let me not be ashamed, let not my enemies triumph over me.
Heavenly Father, thank you for giving us this opportunity to come together this evening and study your word. Help us remember as we go out into our lives the wisdom of Solomon and the wisdom of Jesus, that we not pursue and spend our energies in pursuit of vanities. Help us pursue the things that are important. Help us to be people of light and to shine light on those around us. We pray, Lord, that you remind us this at all times. Bring it to our consciousness as we go out into the world. And we pray that you be with all those who need your help, whoever they may be, and wherever they may be. We pray all these things in Jesus' name.
1 Timothy 6, 17 to 19. I know there's one good verse on it that answers all the questions we're having. So 1 Timothy 6, 17 to 19. Read it out loud. Pray for everybody.
Yes,
Now, understanding this is
Verse 6,
6, 17.